So Weldon's asking, so what determines how long it takes for BlackBird to basically load up and become ready? After you turn the BlackBird on, what determines how long it takes? Well, there's a couple of factors. Let's go into this strategies window. Let's start there in the strategies window. So if backtest mode is turned on, if backtest mode is enabled, that's going to add to the loading time because, BlackBird will be processing all the Bloodhound trade signals, and basically feeding those entry and exit orders to NinjaTrader so NinjaTrader can track them and generate the backtest results, right? So having backtest enabled slows the loading process for BlackBird. That's why it is turned off by default. So that way BlackBird will load up a little faster, right? So that's one factor. And the other factor really is your Bloodhound template. So even though you may not be doing backtesting, Bloodhound still has to run, right? And that's not our choice. It's just that if you're using indicators within your strategy, obviously your indicators have to be updated. And so all your indicators that you're using, have to process all the bar data that's on your chart. So the more days of data that you have on your chart, that's going to add to the load time because all your indicators have to process all that chart data. Right? So all the indicators that BlackBird is using have to run through and process all that bar data. So that is probably your primary culprit there, is having a complex Bloodhound template loaded into BlackBird, right? And another thing to keep in mind is that Bloodhound does have some optimizations built into it, right? So if you have Bloodhound running on the chart as an indicator, right, one of the primary optimizations for Bloodhound is that it's only going to calculate a logic template only after the first time it's selected, right? So if here, let me load up another Bloodhound template. Yeah, I'm going to load up this crossover test. There. All right. So if you had this crossover test 2 Bloodhound template loaded onto your chart through Bloodhound as an indicator, right? In other words, not through BlackBird, then Bloodhound is not going to process all of these logic templates inside, right? You can see that this crossover test 2 has lots of logic templates in it, right? So Bloodhound as an indicator, it's only going to process a logic template after it's been selected. So all of these logic templates that have not been selected to show on the chart, Bloodhound's smart enough to not calculate those logic templates, right? So that saves processing power. However, when Bloodhound runs through a strategy, there's some technical limitations because Bloodhound's running inside of a strategy that all of the logic templates have to be calculated from bar 1. So basically this optimization that Bloodhound has gets thrown out the window. And so all of these logic templates have to be calculated because there's no way for Bloodhound to know which logic templates BlackBird needs or does not need. And there's several options within BlackBird that you can switch between logic templates, right? And so again, if you have the ability to switch between logic templates, well, all of those logic templates need to be ready to go and switch over immediately within a strategy, right? You don't want to wait a couple of seconds for Bloodhound to back calculate a logic template when it gets selected. that you could easily miss out on a trade if that, if that happens. So, that's another kind of common reason, or non-technical reason, as to why all of these logic templates have to be calculated when Bloodhound is running inside a BlackBird. So an oversized Bloodhound template can also slow things down, right? So if you're only using one or two logic templates within BlackBird, well, then it's best to make a separate copy of your Bloodhound file and then remove all the logic templates that aren't being used. So that can speed up the load time, because again, Bloodhound is an indicator, so Bloodhound has to calculate everything while the strategy is loading up, and while NinjaTrader is feeding all this bar data to BlackBird, and also it's feeding it to Bloodhound so that Bloodhound can calculate these logic templates, as the strategy is starting up. But also, even if you have, a moderate Bloodhound template file, I know that a lot of customers, they create charts with like 100 days of data. Even though you don't need 100 days of data, it's just because you set it and you forget it. And people just don't realize that the more data you have on your chart, well, the longer it takes your chart to reload, refresh, and the longer it takes, for new indicators to calculate. And of course, same with strategies, right? So having an excessive amount of days of data on your chart is another very common reason why BlackBird takes so long to start up. Keep the number of days on your chart, to, a moderate minimum amount that you really need, and then BlackBird will load up a lot faster. Yeah. And the same goes for all strategies. All strategies will load up faster with less days of data loaded. So if you have an indicator that requires at least 5 days of data, then maybe only load up, 10 days of data just to be safe. Instead of loading 100 days of data, just, knock it down to 10 days of data. And then BlackBird will load up quicker. Now, of course, if you're back testing, well, then, you have to put the number of days that you want to back test. There's just no way around that. So